I'm drinking Earl Grey because of course I am. Okay, so first of all, I need to explain how I got into the WQ fandom, because I didn't choose the WQ ship, it chose me. This is exactly how it happened. One morning in November, I wake up, I roll over to my side and I go through TikTok. I see an edit of Ben Whishal's Q come up. Oh, Ben Whishaw, I love Ben Whishaw. Wasn't he in a ship with like Craig's version of Bond? Yeah, I vaguely remember seeing like a Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy video about this. Let me. I watch the Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy video. I've got the video playing in one tab. I'm adding fics to my marked for later. And then by the evening, I'm watching Casino Royale. And then this was my life for 2 months. This was my life for the entirety of November, December, I think a little bit of early January. I put off watching Wicked for this. I still have not seen Wicked because I knew that everyone else was getting obsessed with it, and I knew that if I watched Wicked, then the space in my head where my brain rot goes would be replaced with Wicked. And I was like, no, I can't have that happening, because right now my head is filled with double OQ and I like it that way. I want it to stay that way. I'm having a good time here. I have still not seen Wicked. And it's because of this ship, and that's why I'm making a video. So I'm going to start with the movies. Context. I had not seen a single James Bond movie. Actually, let me rephrase that. I had not seen a single Daniel Craig James Bond movie before getting into the WQ ship. I had seen some of the Sean Connery movies because when I was 15, I bought a box set of all the Bond movies, intending to watch my way the entirety of the way through because I am something of a cinephile. But yeah, I gave up by Lazenby, which is actually a pretty sad place to give up because I've gone back and I've watched them now, and Lazenby's pretty good of a Bond, I'd say. I think I couldn't appreciate Lazenby when I was 15, but you know what? I'm going to say this. Lazenby is the best Bond. That's my definitive ranking. But yeah, I'd never seen Craig's version of Bond. I'd never seen Ben Whishal's version of Q. But this time I was just like, yeah, let's just watch the Craig movies. It's a reboot. They reboot each Bond, so I'm sure they've done all they need to explain the story I need. I'm sure the fanfics wouldn't write about plot from the other movies. I'm sure they wouldn't do that, because that would be confusing. Let's put a pin in that. So let's start with Casino Royale. And first of all, I do want to say, while I was watching these movies, I was also simultaneously reading the fanfics in between, which led to spoiling the major twist of Casino Royale, which is, right, so basically, I was reading this fanfic where some character is saying to Q, they're like, yeah, the thing about Bond is he used to be in love with this woman who worked for the Treasury, but then she betrayed him and stole like loads of money from the government, and it's like a whole thing, and that's why he has trust issues. So you've got to be careful with Bond. So I was reading this and I was like, is this made up for the fic? Is this canon? Either way, let's just try and forget about this. So then I go back to watching Casino Royale, conveniently not putting 2 and 2 together yet, because if you've not seen Casino Royale, the Bond girl of that movie is named Vesper, and she works for the Treasury, betrays Bond, and steals a lot of money from the government. And I was able to not put 2 and 2 together for the majority of the movie until it gets to the bit where they've run away together in Venice. And then, when you can just tell, just kind of through film tricks, that the vibe is off. The vibe was off. And then I was just, I don't know, just something clicked. And I was like, oh, Vesper's the woman from the fic. Oh no! It was spoiled for me. It was spoiled just before I would have experienced it organically. So yeah, this is a PSA about the dangers of reading fanfics before you've actually watched the source material. That being said, we can now discuss Casino Royale. So my first note I wrote, this movie fucks. I'll tell you my opinion of all the Craig movies right now. Casino Royale, good. Downhill from that, except for Q. Q was great. Q was the saving grace of those later movies. Casino Royale, it had these really awesome action scenes. Like I feel like it's almost kind of been normalized with a lot of action movies now for the fight scenes to just not be very good. Like a lot of close cam, shaky, can't make out what's going on. But these scenes, genuinely, I do not want to take my eyeballs off the screen because every moment is captivating. I can tell what's going on and it's good. it's good. Also, they made Bond a realistic character that I was actually invested in, because Sean Connery, in comparison, just kind of like some smarmy guy who goes around never really being vulnerable. But this Bond, we see him fall in love, get betrayed. He's also a new 007, so we're seeing him with this kind of like boyish energy to him, you know, this kind of genuine belief in his job that is completely lost in the later movies. Craig just seems to not like the movies more and more as they go on, which I share the sentiment of. And overall, the movie is very kind of like small scale character focused. Like, I remember when I realized, like, oh, the majority of this movie is just going to be this one poker game. The movie is literally just about a poker game that James Bond is playing for the government against a criminal, and if he wins, then he wins. If he loses, then he loses loads of money from the British government. And it's like, it's so stupid, but it's also, it works. And because of this, we're able to get some really good character interactions between James Bond and Hannibal. And I'll add, another thing I liked about this movie is that I actually understand what the villain is doing. Because I feel like I've watched so many movies now where the plot just gets so complicated and I have no idea what's going on. But in this, it's pretty simple. Basically, he'll make bets on the stock market that a company is going to tank, but then he'll actually make that company tank. Like, he bets against an airline, but then he sends someone to blow up a plane of the airline. It's very simple. I can get my head around it. And actually, when they were explaining this in the movie, they used the example of apparently this happened with 9/11. Apparently someone made bets that then earned them a lot of money during 9/11. And I genuinely thought that this was made up for the movie. But then I was listening to the Kill James Bond podcast and they were like, yeah, and this actually happened. And I was like, what? And my final thing to say about Casino Royale is, oh my god, that torture scene, what the fuck? Like, basically, Hannibal just, like, beats James Bond's balls, his Bond balls, his... I just want to add, this is the hardest I've ever laughed when listening to the Kill James Bond podcast, when they were comparing the fact that earlier in the movie, there's this character...
Well, they've remembered Africa exists. Interesting, yeah.
Coney bringing a machete with him to Casino Royale is a little weird.
The distinct impression that the made-up country African warlords fight absolutely barbarically with their machetes and go around cutting women's hands off, compared to the elegant European cock and ball torturer. I think there's some suspect stuff underlying that.
Absolutely.
To say the least.
I'm going to be thinking about the phrase, the elegant European cock and ball torturer for a while.
But yeah, like, that scene was like anyone who says that James Bond can't be with Q because it's weird for James Bond to be gay, like, I don't know, like, there were homoerotic tones from the start. Like, Hannibal, like, whips his balls, and then James is like, ooh, yeah, harder, daddy Hannibal. Then, for the next movie, Quantum of Solace, I don't remember anything, it was a very boring movie. Next movie, then we have Skyfall, where Q is introduced. Twink Q!
Where he meets Femboy Q.
Look at his little face. Look at his little face. Oh, he's 32 in this movie, but look at his little face. I found this promotional image posted back in 2012 for the movie, and it's like, how can you expect someone not to be obsessed with this man? Like, I really want to know what it was like to be in the room when they're discussing the movie, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna make him, like, look like he's 12, and also 80 at the same time. And I also want to say that this Q is way dumber than the fanfic Q, because he literally... So the villain of this movie is a hacker. They capture the hacker, they get his laptop. Q plugs it into MI6, and then suddenly he's like, oh no, plugging the laptop in made them hackers. Oh no, who could have seen this? The head of the technology department, maybe? Maybe he should know that? So yeah, they did my boy dirty in this movie. Like, I know he's smarter than this. I know the true fanon, which we all know is the actual true canon, okay? The true fanon Q would never be this dumb. And on, like, the topic of the hacker villain, this is what I mean when I say, like, in Casino Royale, I actually understood what the villains, like, what he did. Because in this one, I don't. He hacks. He hacks. Yeah, like his goal is basically just to get rid of M because he has mummy issues and he wants to kill M. And it's like, okay, but like, why does he have to do it in such a complicated way? So the hacker, his name is Silva, gets kidnapped. But actually, guys, it was his plan all along to get kidnapped. He's like, yes, I have it in my mind that if I attack MI6, they'll go into these war kind of bunker things. So they'll go there, and then when I get captured, I'll be in this specific area, which I can escape from then. And then there's going to be a tube that just like free falls in an unrealistic way, just like you have to accept that happens. Like it's very kind of Stephen Moffat writing. Like, I'm so much smarter than you, audience. Did you see that coming? I bet you didn't, because I'm one step ahead of you. And it's like could you just make a movie that makes sense? On the topic of Silva, this movie has more gay undertones. Like, you saw Hannibal was gay. Silva is like fully like feeling James up, trying to make him comfortable, and then James is like, what makes you think this is my first time? Okay, so canon James gay? James gay, canon gay James? There, they made it canon. So anyone who doesn't like WQ, you can show them that moment. You can tell them that James Bond is canonically gay. He's done this before. He's done gay before. Gay, he's done it. And he's done it before. So it's canon, actually. Next movie is Spectre and No Time to Die. I've combined those movies because, to be honest, I constantly confuse them. I remember when I was watching the movies and then I would instantly listen to a Kill James Bond podcast afterwards. I was listening to them confuse the movies, and I remember thinking at the time, how are you confusing the movies? They have completely different plots. But now that it's been like a while, like, yeah, it's like they kind of mush together. They're not very distinct. It's just kind of like confusing plot gibberish that just blobs together, and I can't tell them apart. So we're going to talk about them both. So first of all, I'm going to say it. Madeline is so boring. Like, I'm sorry. That makes me feel bad. But honestly, she is. Basically, Madeline is this woman, this girl. Here's the thing, like, people will talk about the age gap between Q and James, and like, that's fine. But Madeline is, compared to how old James is by the time he meets her, it, like, yeah, you do really feel the age gap, like, in a weird way. Like, I think it would work if there was actual chemistry between the actors, but there isn't. So it just kind of feels like that episode of How I Met Your Mother where Ted gets with like a young, like 20-something-year-old girl, and it's just like, it's like they have nothing in common. Like, that's what it feels like watching Spectre. Like, they're literally saying like, I love you, and talking about like committing to each other, because Madeline's like, oh, I can't commit to this life with you, I can't commit to you. And it's like, you have known each other for at most like a weekend. And then in No Time to Die, so basically No Time to Die starts with them, they ran off together, but then they break up. And then we meet Madeline later in the movie, and it's revealed that she has had a child. She has had James Bond's child. No Time to Die is actually just a fanfic that got confused with the script when they were sending it to the producers. It feels so like fan fiction, but like in a bad way. It's weird. But yeah, just in general, like, I didn't like the plot of Spectre and No Time to Die. At this point, I was kind of just watching for Q. Like, I'd have like half of my screen having the movie, half of the screen just like on Tumblr. But then anytime Q would come on, full screen, I'd watch him. I'd be like, yes, you go Q, my favourite character. Oh, I love Q so much. And then he'd go, and then I'd back to Tumblr. I think it's worth saying though that in No Time to Die, they made Q gay, like canonically. Like, Bond and Moneypenny go to his house and he's like cooking up a dinner. Like, it's very obviously a date, someone is coming round, and then Q is getting annoyed at the two, and he's like, he's going to be here any minute. And it's like, oh, so Q gay, like gay, canon gay. They didn't make James gay, but okay. And this is what I mean. It's like the torture scene, the hacker flirting scene, the canonical gay Q. It's like this movie, it's like they want us to ship WQ. It's like they intentionally gave us a boring female character. And it's because the movie is secretly written by WQ truthers. Okay, I see you. Yeah, but they make Q gay, which is like cool and progressive for a movie franchise that's not been so progressive over the years. And I want to add another point for Q as canon is the fact that Q is the last person to speak to Bond before, spoiler alert, he died. Okay, so Bond dies. He's like basically filled with poison that is contagious to everyone around him. Well, actually, no, it's contagious. It's so stupid. It's a poison that makes you poisonous to specifically people related to you. So if he lives and goes out into the world, he can poison his daughter. And this is the stupid reason they gave him a daughter. So he's like, no, I'm just going to nuke myself. Q is like on the comms with him, and that he's literally the last person to speak to Bond before he dies. And it's like, okay, so doomed Yowie, that's what this is. I can see what you're doing, writers. I know that you want to make gay James Bond, but you can't, because how will you get all your watch sponsorships then? But I can see what you're doing. I can read between the lines, okay? I'm like you. I'm one step ahead. I can see it all in the mind palace, how it all fits together. And then when you make Q and James Bond the letters and you rearrange them, it spells out gay. So now I want to talk about the fics. So first of all, I just want to go over the characters and how they've been characterized in sort of the more fanon universe as opposed to the canon. Because like I said, canon Q is dumb. Canon Q is a dumb girl, but fanon Q is always like, he's always one step ahead. He's always smart. He's a bit of a Mary Sue, to be honest. And I love him for it. You know, he's always got contingencies for everything. Like, there's this moment in this one fic where every time Bond goes to visit Q in Q Branch, without even like turning around, Q knows that he's there. And Bond's trying to figure it out. He's like, well, there's no mirror there. He can't see my reflection. How does he do it? And it turns out Q has some sort of like tech thing that alerts him to who is behind him. Like, this is what I mean. Like, fanon Q always has like all these things that just make him smart and aware of everything. Canon Q can never. But yeah, most fics tend to be from Q's perspective. Go figure, nerdy Tumblr people identify with the cardigan twink. So because of this, a lot of the Q POV fics I feel like kind of range between kind of two groups. There's the Q fics that are written by what I can assume to be an adult. And then there are the Q fics that I think are very obviously written by a teenage girl, and you can kind of see them projecting onto Q a bit. Like, there's a lot of fics where Q just like has the biggest girly crush on James, and he's like, oh, I have such a crush on James. Oh, I hope he notices me. Oh, and also on the topic of age, I feel like Q's age like ranges so much in the fics. Like, I've seen fics where he's written to be 23. I've seen fics where he's like, you know, actual like what Ben Whishaw's age was in the movies, which was like he was 32 in Skyfall, so which means he was 35 in Spectre, closer to his 40s by the time No Time to Die came out. But yeah, like, there's a lot of people who will write him to be very much on the younger side, and then will emphasize that. They'll emphasize sort of the age gap between the two men. And then we have James in the fics. Now, I feel like I said, we get most of the fics from Q's perspective, but we do occasionally get them from James. And this is what I've pieced together from what he tends to be like in the fics. So I feel like a lot of the fics kind of characterize him as like suave, flirty. My favorite like Q and Bond dynamics are where Bond is like trying to ruffle Q, like he flirts with him and embarrasses him, and then Q is just like, you have to stop it. And I love that. I eat that up. But we will also get some fics where we get to see more of James's vulnerable side, which I would like to see more of. I feel like there aren't enough Bond fics where we get to see that more vulnerable side of him. Like, maybe there'll be some fics that just generally reference like that he's kind of traumatized, you know, because he regularly goes abroad and kills people for a living. But when we do tap into those vulnerabilities, a lot of the time it's like James is lonely. Maybe James has a bit of a death wish because he knows he's not going to make it to retirement. So he's just kind of waiting for when he dies in some mission in the field one day. For him, it's kind of like inevitable. So I think that's always interesting. And then there's the third character who seems to come up a lot, called Alec. And So remember I said how I was watching the movies and reading the fics at the same time? So this character Alec just keeps coming up over and over again in fics that I'm reading, and I keep expecting him to show up in the movies, and then I get to No Time to Die and I'm like, huh. So I still don't know who Alec is. Like, who is Alec? I've managed to piece together from a quick Google search that I think he shows up in the pre-Craig movies. So he's like, I guess like just a fan favorite character. And the thing is, I could just do some more research, but it's almost kind of fun just to experience who this character is through the fics, which seems to be basically he's everything Bond is times 10. So like, Bond is flirty. Oh, this guy flirts with everyone. Bond is like a little messed up because he murders people regularly. Alec is an actual sociopath. Bond's a bit jokey, he's quite charismatic. Alec is constantly cracking jokes and making light of any situation I'm in, no matter how dire or serious. And just in general, like I say, I don't know who Alec is. I don't know what to picture in my head when I'm reading him, but I always picture him just kind of like Bond, but just like double the size, like double the muscles. He's a bit taller as well. He's got more scars on his body. And if you actually know who Alec is and you think I'm accurate in that description, let me know below. So now I want to go over sort of the kind of like fic tropes I've seen pop up. So, okay, first of all, let's get it out of the way. Sherlock. There's a lot of crossover fics with Sherlock, and I'm sorry to say, I've not read any of them. I've not been in the Sherlock fandom. Actually, let me rephrase that. I am in the Sherlock fandom, but the Sherlock & Co. fandom. I love Sherlock & Co. And I've not been in the Stephen Moffat Sherlock fandom for several years. So reading crossover fics between that and Q would just feel kind of weird. But if you've read some Sherlock and 00Q fics, do let me know what you think of them in the comments below. I do want to know like if there's any reoccurring tropes that seem to happen. But yeah, now that we've got Sherlock out of the way, some of the tropes are Bond sneaks into Q's home. So this happens quite a lot. There are a lot of fics about this. There's so many fics, in fact, that there was one fic where the summary was like, there are so many fics where Bond sneaks into Q's home. So I wrote one where Q sneaks into Bond's. So like it is a reoccurring thing that happens in a lot of fics. Next trope is cats. Just cats. Canonically, Q does have cats. They mention it twice in the movies. In Spectre. So basically, James is trying to get Q to do something that he shouldn't do, that will get him in trouble. And then Q just goes, just a reminder that I have a mortgage and 2 cats. And then in No Time to Die, we actually see his cat. And it's like one of those like naked, hairless cats, which is like, I guess feels really fitting actually. But here's the thing. In the fanfics, I am personally anti-cat. I'm sorry to say, but it's because I just don't think it makes sense. There are so many fics that will emphasize Q's kind of workaholicness and his just general like not taking care of himself. And I would go far to say that this kind of is what Fan and Q is. He works long hours, he is married to his work, and he spends barely any time in his home. And I just don't think he has the time to be caring for cats. I don't think he has time to care for a naked cat. Like, because I'm sure I saw this thing online that said like, I think you have to like moisturize them because they don't have like the oils in their hairs to keep them moisturized. So I'm just picturing like Q, he's had a long day, you know, he stopped the terrorist threat and he comes home and he's just like moisturizing his naked cat. And it's just, I don't believe he has time for that. Another thing that tends to happen is Q and James kind of bantering over the comms pieces that they're wearing. And this is because, okay, so different writers will have different approaches to the fact that James Bond, like he works for an organization that by its very nature, he has to be abroad all the time. So some fic writers will just completely ignore this. They'll just have James like in the UK a lot between missions, right? But some writers will have James on his missions, but he spends a lot of time on the comms with Q, and you get some really great banter from this now and again. Like my favorite example of this is where Q is like, do not throw your gun, 007. I repeat, do not throw your gun. I've thrown the gun. Another trope is asexual Q. I'm not asexual, so I can't speak to why, but it seems that Q is a character who just kind of attracts like asexual people projecting themselves onto him. So there are a lot of fics where he'll be asexual and there'll be a lot of like internal monologuing about how he feels about this, where I'm pretty sure it's just the author talking about how they feel. So they're quite interesting. I've read a couple. There's one fic that's actually quite interesting where Q is into Bond and he thinks that Bond isn't going to like him back because Bond is, Mr. Serial Seducer, like he's constantly, But then when they finally kind of have a conversation about how the fact, that Q likes him, but Q is also asexual, Bond actually is so fine with this because he is constantly having to seduce people. He's constantly having to be the pursuer. He's constantly entering scenarios with people where the expectation is sex. And to him, the idea of being in a relationship with someone where there is no expectation of sex and he can just have like the intimacy, like just like some cuddle time or just someone to come home to where there's no expectation of anything else. That's nice for him. So I thought that was interesting. And again, like I always like these moments of James. Like I want to see more of these moments of Bond where we can see how being 007 affects him and how that affects like how he functions as a normal person, like when he's not on a mission, We also have sick fics, specifically where Bond is taking care of Q. I'm actually trying to remember. I feel like I have a memory of reading Q taking care of Bond, but I can't bring it to the surface. But yeah, generally it's Bond taking care of Q, which really fits because Q is constantly like being a workaholic, so it always makes sense why he's sick. And then Bond, it just kind of makes natural sense for Bond to be taking care of him, because Bond almost, a lot of fics write him with this kind of protective element to Q, and this kind of caregiver role for him. So I think it's always really fitting when Bond is taking care of his little quartermaster, just taking care of him, making him drink his tea, making sure he's warm. Also, just in general, there's a lot of domestic fics. Like I said, there are a lot of fics where the writers just kind of ignore the fact that James is an agent and they'll just write him a lot of the time between missions. And this is when we get a lot of domestic fics that take place mainly at Q's flat or house, wherever they've decided he lives. Because it always just kind of makes sense that James doesn't take care of his home. So then he always likes coming to Q's because even though, here's the thing, Q is such a workaholic, but also he always has a really nice home. Like I feel like I've read so many fics where Q has just a lovely home that Bond loves coming home to and feels safe and cozy in. So those are probably some of my favourite fics because they're always like really cute and cozy. They're really nice to like read, in your bed, in your duvet, just like, oh. And then another trope in general is just Q drinking Earl Grey all the time. I swear it was mentioned in like one line in Skyfall. He just offhandedly mentions drinking Earl Grey and then everyone latched on to that. And they were like, oh my God, his favourite drink is Earl Grey. He's constantly drinking Earl Grey, specifically in his Scrabble mug. That's his favourite mug. He loves that mug. But just in general, he's an avid tea drinker. It's funny, there's one fic I read where it's like Q has all these different types of tea in his kitchen and he loves to drink all of them. There's another fic where Q has all these different types of tea that Bond keeps buying him abroad when he's on missions, and Q's not into any of them. He just wants his Earl Grey. Another trope, like I said, is Polly, Q, Bond, and Alec. I've read one and I don't wish to read another. It was a lot. Also, the term boffin. I've never read the term boffin so many times in my life. I've never read it at all in my life, to be honest. I don't know if this is a case of like American people using a term that they think British people use all the time, or if this genuinely is a term that English people use all the time, but I'm not aware because I'm Welsh. Because I use Welsh terms all the time. I'll use stuff like lush, cwtch, bach. Like I'll say those really casually. Maybe English people do say boffin, I don't know. But like I feel like this is a thing I see in fics all the time, like especially in like drarry fics. Like I remember like when I was reading drarry fics back in the day, I would read terms like prat, sod, tosser, and it's like I don't know anyone who uses those terms. Also, just in general, the trope of Mallory and him just being so done with the two. It's like he finds out they're a couple and it's just like, I could not care less. Just leave me alone. I hate you both so much. I love Mallory in the fics. He's always kind of this just like grumpy paternal figure who's constantly present in the fics, kind of in the way that M was almost this maternal figure in the franchise. Mallory is basically that. Mallory is dad. It's like, oh, don't let dad know. Oh, we're gonna get in trouble. And Mallory's just like, he can't be asked with them. He's so done with them. Now, we're actually going to go into some specific fics. These are all fics that I personally like, so if there's a fic left out, I'm sorry, these are just the ones that I like. So the first fic we're going to talk about is Synchronicity by Stereobone. So this is one of the first fics, it might have actually been the very first fic I read when getting into OOQ. I think it's a really good entry level fic for kind of like what their dynamic is. And this is one of those tropey fics where it's a Bond constantly sneaking into Q's home kind of fic. So this is a pretty standard one. Bond keeps showing up at Q's flat after missions. He hangs around for a couple of days and then he'll show up at MI6 having just got back and then do his debrief. I like in this fic, Moneypenny tells Q that a kimono dragon ate one of Bond's guns and Q thinks that she's joking. And I thought that she was joking because I read this before I actually then saw in the movies that yes, a Komodo dragon does eat one of James's guns. I was able to get exactly in the headspace of Q there. And I feel like this fic is really good for like sassy Q and just kind of like general banter between the two. Like I just want to read out a couple like quotes I pulled. The hand leaves his mouth and Q scrabbles for his glasses, slides them on to get a better look. It is Bond, in the flesh, in his flat. Q glances at the clock. It's nearly 4 a.m. He can smell blood. MI6 is 12 kilometers west of here. Do you have antiseptic? I feel like that's just such a them interaction. Another one is, he pulls the cat food out and Bond hums behind him. You have a cat? No, I'm just rather fond of the food, Q says. Oh yeah, by the way, Q's cat is called Stravinsky. Because of course he is. So picture a naked cat called Stravinsky. This was quite funny. Morning, he says, doing crunches on Q's table. On his table. I eat there, Q says, which is a lie. He usually eats in front of his computer. But still, he could. So yeah, like Bond really makes himself a home at Q's flat. Like it just starts out as him just kind of like sleeping there, like crashing there after a mission. But then like Q comes home one day and Bond is just like, he's made dinner for them both. And he gets out some wine and they have like a little date. It's very nice. But at some point in the fic, we do eventually get to Bond kind of opening up a bit. And we learn then that the reason Bond keeps coming to Q's flat after missions is because each mission he comes back a little bit traumatized from what he's dealt with. He kind of needs like this processing time away from MI6, somewhere he can go where they won't know he's in the country yet. And then once he's processed, he can actually go in and do that debrief where he's now prepared to bring up all this horrible stuff again. So I really like this. Like I said, there's not enough trauma Bond. So yeah, I'd really recommend this fic. By the way, all the fics are going to be linked down in the description. So if you want to read them, you can just go down there. Next is my favourite fic. This is my penultimate. This is the mega fic. This is my favourite. It's called Quriosity. Get it? Quriosity by Dr. Girlfriend. That's a cool username. I like that. I just want to read out this tag that the fanfic had. Not gonna tag every sex act, just trust me, there's plenty. I like this fic because it has a lot of trauma Q. I love my little, traumatized gay characters, okay? And this fic is interesting because basically Bond is into Q from the start. Like he likes Q, he flirts with him a lot, and at some point he shoots his shot, he kisses him, and then immediately Q is like, get off me. And then this is when we learn a little bit later that Q has a thing, he does not like to be touched. Like in any context, not even like a brush on the hand, he does not like to be touched. And this is because he has some sexual trauma from his youth, so he has all these systems in place. So when you look back on what we've read of the fic so far, you're like, oh yeah, no one ever touches him, and he makes it that way. So then what I really like about this fic, and these are my favourite types of fics, where it's character A is very traumatized, character B slowly earns that trust, and I love these kind of fics, because it's just the gradual, like, letting someone close, even though the last time you did, you got burned, but this time it's different. This time, you feel safe. And oh, I can't get enough of that. I can't get enough of that. I love these kind of fics. And like once they do get closer, so I would have been satisfied with the fic if they never touched at all. But at some point, Bond does earn his trust, and then it gets freaky. Like the rating just goes up and up and up. Like it's a lot. But I enjoyed it. I also just want to give a shout out to Q's converted stable, which he lives in. So the fic describes this. It says that he lives in an old stable in London, which is a listed building, so Q can't change the outside, but he has converted the inside. And then the fic author actually left a link to an actual real life what they were talking about as like a visual aid, and like I'm so obsessed with it. Just in general, like when I was reading all these OOQ fics that are set in London, I was just really obsessed with the idea of living in London, because there are so many different living setups that Q has. Like he lives in flats, he lives in a big house in one fic, he lives in a converted stable. So I just got really obsessed with like looking on Rightmove, picturing places to live in London as if I can afford that right now. So yeah, this was my favorite fic. It also has a short sequel, and it's actually really fun. Actually, I don't have written down what it's called, but I will link it down below. Basically, Q is in Q Branch, and Bond is like away, right? But then Q Branch gets attacked, and then Q has to be the action hero for once, and James is now in his ear directing him. So it's almost like a role reversal, which is really fun to read. So if you just want like a short, fun action fic, I would recommend that one, which I will link below. I also just want to bring up this interaction that actually has fan art, which I kind of referenced earlier. Listen, O7, do not throw your water. Do you hear me? Do not do it. And then James just throws his gun and misses. Then we have, now this is a really fun fic. This is called, I think it's like Latin, Nodus Tollens. Nodus Tollens. Nodus Tollens by Only One Truth for Jana. So this is like a really fun, like Quriosity feels like an 8-part Netflix drama, but Nodus, whatever it is, feels more kind of like an action romp, just like a feel-good action movie, really. And I was actually shocked when I was looking at the two fics. It's actually longer than Quriosity, even though it feels a lot shorter. So the pacing is really good on this. Like it moves really quickly. Also, I'm looking at the cover image right now, and yes, it does kind of look like a BDSM fic, but it's actually like so unserious. Like I'm... So basically the premise is that Q has just started at MI6. So this is a bit of an AU. Q meets James when he's lower rank, when he's not as the quartermaster. And this is actually similar to another fic I enjoyed called Ordinary Numbers by Boots and Blossoms, where Q works for the MI6 call center, like the tech helpline for the agents. And this actually then led me to looking at MI6's career page to see like how you get a job there, like an entry-level job. And yeah, you can just apply. So if you want to live your Q being a call center agent fantasy, like you can do that. But also looking at this careers page made me realize, oh, working at the MI6 is probably just really boring, isn't it? No, because like I've worked as a civil servant, and I can tell you it was just kind of like boring bureaucratic work. Like now having seen that careers page, like I'm just picturing MI6, and all I can picture is just like DVLA. And what it was like when I used to work there. But yeah, basically the plot is Q has just started working at MI6, and after about half a year of working there, he's now taken a holiday to Paris. He goes to Paris, he watches a show, and then who should run out on stage chasing someone with a gun but James Bond? And then Q, along with everyone else, like runs away, gets into a taxi, but then oh no, James gets in the taxi too, and then shoots the driver. This is Editor Louise, because I am such a silly goose. I completely misremembered what happened. So Q, actually what happens is Q gets into the taxi. It's a normal taxi driver. He drives off for a bit. Then at some point the taxi stops, or gets stopped. The dangerous guy that James was chasing, he yanks the driver out and then uses the taxi as an escape car. Bond is chasing him, and then that's how Bond ends up shooting this guy in the taxi, because he's the actual bad guy. So that's what happens. And then he turns and sees that Q has seen the whole thing. Q is now a witness. he cannot let Q get away. So this fic is really fun because it's like Q doesn't know that this is James Bond. He doesn't know that he's a 007 agent. So from Q's perspective, James is just this madman with a gun who just killed someone in front of him. And James is basically now keeping him captive because he can't let him get away and break his cover for the mission. So like that's why the cover image has them in the handcuffs, because it eventually gets to a point where Q keeps trying to run away and Bond just has to handcuff them together. The dynamic between them two is so fun in this fic because Q is constantly like, I don't trust you, you're gonna kill me, like runs away, and then Bond's just like, this is not ideal for me either, but I have stuff to do. But he can't say that it's MI6 stuff. If he just said, like, I'm a 007 agent, I work for MI6, Q could be like, I also work for MI6. What a coinky-dink. But instead, you get this really fun fic, which here's the thing I will say about the fic. It does kind of, like, when I was reading the fic, I did kind of think to myself that this reads kind of like a Wattpad fic. Like, can't you picture it like you are YN and you've been kidnapped by, like, one of the One Direction members and they won't let you go, and you're like, oh, let me go, Harry Styles, and then Harry's like, no, I gotta keep you captive because I'm a dangerous man. So yeah, the fic kind of has those vibes, but like in a really fun way, like in like, you know, like the good Wattpad fics you read when you were little, like, you know, like those good vibes, like those nostalgic vibes, like it's like that, like it's a really fun time. Saying that though, I will say, like, so like this is why I said earlier, there are fics that I feel like are very clearly written by adults and fics that are very clearly written by teenage girls. It does almost feel like Q is a bit teenage girl coded because he's a lot of the time he's like, you have to let me go. Oh, are you gonna let me go? Please. Oh, you're dangerous. You're a dangerous man. Oh. And I eat it up. Yes, give me my little 13-year-old 32 man. I will also say there's a lot of wump Q in this, like wump, injured, weak Q, which is really fun. Like basically, he breaks his wrist, like sprains his wrist from like the start of the fic. Basically the taxi like comes to an abrupt stop and his wrist just kind of like crunches into the chair in front of him, and then he spends, I kid you not, the entire fic with this sprained wrist that anytime like he like even touches it, it's like, oh, ow, it hurts so much. Also, he gets drugged at one point. James gives him like painkillers for his wrist, and he's got like a couple options. Like I think he's gotten them from like a first aid kit, and then he's like, "Do you have any allergies?" And Q's like, "No, but I can't take this specific painkiller med because it like knocks me out and makes me really loopy." So James doesn't give him that, but then later on in the fic, he needs Q. Basically, he's dropped them off at like a safe house, basically. But he needs Q to stay put while he goes, and I think he's like moving the car that they came in so that, you know, their car can't be tracked. And he needs Q to just stay put and not try to escape because he's a little escape artist, he is. So James just gives him some painkillers. Q just takes them nonchalantly. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of stuck in this situation. Fine, I'll take my painkillers. And then he immediately realizes he's just completely knocked out and loopy. And then James reveals like he didn't believe Q. He was like, oh, I didn't know they would knock you out that much. I thought they'd just make you a little bit sleepy. And Q is like, no, they make me loopy. And I hate you so much, and it's so funny. Also, Alec shows up. We get an Alec mention, and again, I do not know who that is. And it's really funny when Alec showed up, because it almost felt to me, like, you remember how I said, like, this fic had Wattpad vibes? It almost felt like another, like, One Direction character showing up. Like, it just has those vibes of, like, there's the teenage girl off to the side, and then there's the two, like, the guys, and they're palling around, and they're like, oh, isn't she so cute? Oh. But yeah, overall, really fun fic. It's obviously hilarious when they finally figure out that each other are MI6 agents, which does not happen for a while. You keep thinking, like, maybe it'll happen. It does not happen. Well, it does not happen until basically the end of the fic. So it's really good. I'd really recommend it. Then we have Lay It Down by Hamper72. So this is one of those sick fics that I mentioned, but this one's like really sick. Like Q has, it's eventually revealed he has bronchitis. I think that's, how do you say it though? There we go, I'm right. Yeah, but like it starts out, Q has this like cough, and then it just turns into like full like bronchitis, and it's like, it's bad. So this is probably what I'd call the definitive OOQ sick fic. I will say, like, this fic came out in 2013, but it has really, like, weirdly accurate, like, COVID vibes. Like, I was reading this fic, and it's like, it just reminded me so much of COVID and like all the COVID symptoms I heard about. Like, I never personally experienced like the worst side of COVID, neither me or anyone in my family. But reading this fic, like I was reading the descriptions of like what Q was going through, and I was like this feels kind of weird. Like, this feels like I'm kind of uncomfortable like reading some of this. So if you don't like, if you have any kind of like COVID trauma, maybe skip this fic. But if you are really into seeing QB like at his absolute sickest and reading him being pathetic and wumpy, oh my god, is this the fic for you? Like, what I like about this fic is that Bond sees Q at his most pathetic and actually disgusting. Like, there are moments where he's like hacking and like coughing up mucus, hunched over the sink, and he's just coughing and coughing, and it's just like, the way it's described, it's just like, he looks awful, he's not showered in a few days, you know, and he's all greasy. I think also Bond has to accompany him to the toilet because he's just so like weak that he can't be trusted to be in there by himself. And this, I really like this fic because it's like, you know, you're close with someone when they can see you at your absolute worst. And that's what this fic is. It's showing how close they are, because in this fic, they're basically already together, but they won't acknowledge that they're together. So they're basically like, yeah, we're just friends with benefits. Yeah, we basically live in the house, and like Bond never leaves, but like, we're just it's casual. We're not, Bond has not gone to his flat in 6 months, but it's casual. Bond keeps coming home with tea for Q every time he goes on a mission, but like, it's casual. But yeah, so that's kind of what the fic is. They're basically together, but they won't admit how together they are. And there's this really fun scene where Moneypenny is taking Q home, because this is what I like. So James is such a worrier in this fic. Like, the fic starts with him being like Q wakes up and he's like, morning, and James is immediately like, you're not breathing right. And it's basically implied that James has been listening to Q breathing while he's been sleeping and been comparing it to every other instance of Q breathing, and instantly knows that Q has something wrong with his chest. But yeah, so like, Bond has to go on a mission, and he's so worried about Q that he calls Moneypenny, and he's like, just check up on him, you know, like, we're not together though, like, it's so casual, but like, you know, just check up on him, you know, like, make sure he has his tea and his soup. And then eventually Pennyworth has to just take Q home because he is too weak to be working. Like, one of the doctors in medical literally is like, go home, you have bronchitis. So Moneypenny takes Q home, and then he goes to take a shower, and then Moneypenny's like, well, I have to use this opportunity to look around. So she looks around, and she's just noticing all the like, just like the details that just show that how married they are. Like, Q doesn't drink coffee, but there's a coffee maker because James likes coffee. They're just so together. And just in general, what I like about this fic is, even though it's like a bit distressing how sick Q is, it's also just really cozy to read James, like, once he finally gets back from his mission, it's just really cozy to read him taking care of him. And there's just like really strong like domestic vibes to this fic, which I really like. And obviously eventually they do confess their feelings, and they're like, okay, we are a thing, let's put a label on it. Like, really the core of this fic is just showing how married core they are. So if you are into that, read ahead. Then we have Curtains by Winter Hill. So basically, Q's flat gets blown up, and him and Bond end up buying a house together. Bond's flat, I think, has gotten taken away from him because he's faked his death one too many times. And Q is basically homeless because his flat got blown up. He's kind of half sure he's been targeted, so he's also just very paranoid and scared. So he spends a while just living with Bond in a hotel, and they're just living in this hotel together, and Q is just like, really, he doesn't like the fact that the hotel staff can just get in with their cards. Like, he just really wants to get out. So then him and Bond just kind of agree, that they're gonna buy a house together. To them, it's like the perfect, it's just, nothing romantic. They're just buying a house together, just casually, because like it's a win-win for both of them. Q gets to increase his buying power because it's hard to buy when you're single. Bond has loads of money because he is a spy with a death wish who doesn't really expect himself to retire, and also he comes from wealth, so yeah, he can spend money on a house. And it's also good for Q because he basically has a bodyguard who lives with him when he is in the UK. And for Bond, it's nice because when he's out of the UK, he has someone taking care of the house. He doesn't have to come back to this like barren, dusty environment, so it's like a win-win for both of them. And also like the house they buy is like a really like, it's like a doer-upper kind of house. Like Q guts the whole thing and refurbishes it all, and like this plus like the refurbished stable, which Q did himself, like he didn't buy it refurbished, he refurbished that stable. I just think if I had a nickel for every time that Q played Homes Under the Hammer, I'd have 2 nickels. But it's weird that it happened twice. But yeah, this is just kind of like a fun little domestic fic where they live together and they kind of have this home together, and then obviously they get a little bit closer. It's one of those fics where it's like they become so close without really realizing anything's changed, and then at one point they're just like, oh, we're basically married, aren't we? What I also enjoyed about this fic is like Q, like I said, he's very paranoid and anxious because he thinks he's been targeted, which turns out to be true. He has been targeted. So he's just in this house, he's nervous a lot, and Bond will like comfort him, which is really cute. There's also this lovely scene towards the end where basically Q has like booby trapped the whole house. He's like home alone the whole house. It's like impenetrable. And there's like a baddie, like a bad guy who's tried to sneak into the house, but he gets like caught in the garage. So then Q is just like watching a live video feed of this guy in the garage. And then he just kind of calls Bond and he's like, there's a guy in the garage. Actually, I think I have the quote here. So Bond is like, please tell me this isn't our equivalent of getting rid of spiders from the bath. Q snorted. Please, dear, you've got to come home. There's a terrorist in the garage and I think he's angry. And then I like this next line. He might have sounded a bit less flippant when he said that because Bond's reaction was immediate and damning. Are you all right? So yeah, like then Bond comes home, he sorts out the spider, and then they confess their love to each other, and it's a really cute fic. There's like so many, like it's actually weird how many like really strong domestic fics there are with like really strong domestic vibes, because it's so like the opposite to what Bond is. Like he's constantly abroad by the very nature of what his job is. He's constantly abroad and seducing people, and then he's just in these fics, he's just like having this nice kind of home life with Q. So I always love these fics. They're always really cozy to read. I also want to shout out the fic Nervous Flyer and His Assassin-esque Boyfriend by Humming Bee, small o, capital O, small o. So it's basically just this short outsider POV fic where this flight attendant is like observing them, and they're just really adorable. They're just like really couple vibes. Q, so it's mentioned very briefly in Skyfall by Moneypenny, not even by Q directly himself. Moneypenny says like, oh yes, Q is afraid of flying. And I just want to point out the dramatic irony then of like the last time that Q speaks to Bond before Bond dies, Q is on a plane. Like Q's just never having a good time on planes. But yeah, in this fic, because Q has a fear of flying, he is just like drugged out, and like Bond is just like holding him and taking care of him. It's very protective. Like anyone looks at them, Bond is like he's just like, and it's just so cute. It's like that they're so married. Then we also have People Can Surprise You or Not by P. Dameron. So this is basically just Bond meets Knives Out. Like it's very Agatha Christie vibes. So basically like one of Bond's old like chums from, his youth, his rich youth, is like maybe a terrorist. So for some reason then, Q has to pretend to be his boyfriend. So like, yeah, they have to go to his old friend's house to be in a fake relationship. Basically, it's a fake relationship fic, and it's really fun. And I just want to read out the summary. I'm not like you, Bond. I don't exactly have a technique for getting rich strangers to like me. Just do your naive, cute puppy thing, and they'll be doting on you in no time. My what? The fic is actually really funny because Q is having to play like the doting boyfriend, but like on the inside, he's just like, I hate this. And then at some point, he just like explodes on everyone once the cover is up. And he's like, where are my 6 agents? You are all dumb and I'm so smart and I'm not just a stupid little boy toy. And I love it. It's such a fun fic. And obviously it has lots of moments where it's like they have to pretend kiss each other and it's great. And then my last fic is called In Which Mallory Finds Out. And I have nothing to say about this fic except I just want to read out the summary. Bond, he says, perhaps a little sleep raspy while Q buries his nose in his collarbone. There's a long, long pause, somehow bringing with tension. And then, Bond, what the devil are you doing answering the quartermaster's phone at 3 a.m? Mallory finds out that 007 and the quartermaster are sleeping together. Literally and figuratively. I just love Phantom Mallory. He's so grumpy. He hates everyone. So that's me kind of done with the fics now. Now I just kind of want to talk about sort of like the future of OOQ, meaning like what the actors are doing now. So first of all, I want to bring up how both of them have fucked Hugh Grant. Daniel Craig has played Benoit Blanc in the BBCU, Benoit Blanc Cinematic Universe, and he's very clearly dating Hugh Grant, who is called Philip. And then also we have Ben Whishaw and Hugh Grant together in A Very English Scandal, which... Right, so I have to describe the plot of this. So A Very English Scandal is based on a true story about a minister having an affair with this younger man, and then this guy is basically like, you don't give me enough attention, I hate you, I'm gonna tell everyone that you're gay and you are having an affair and ruin your political career. And then this minister's only logical reaction to this is to try and murder the guy based on a true story. I also just want to bring up Hugh Grant in Paddington because Ben Whishaw does play Paddington and Hugh Grant is like the main villain of Paddington 2. I mean, they don't fuck, but I just think it's funny how like Hugh Grant he's like the glue in my conspiracy board of like OOQ. Like he's just there all throughout these movies they've been in. Like, but now what I really want to talk about is Black Doves and Queer. So these are 2 projects that Ben Whishaw and Daniel Craig have starred in very recently. These came out like really recently within the last few months. Black Doves actually I think it came out in like November or December, so like right when I was like in the thick of this fandom, right? It's just really interesting because in both these projects they play openly queer men, but also their roles have kind of like flipped. So in the Bond movies, Q is the kind of nerd who is not like the strong super agent, and Bond is, you know, the tough super agent who can kill people. But in Black Doves, Ben Whishaw plays an assassin who kills people for a living and is like the hottest he has literally ever been. Like, oh my god. And in Queer, so I've not watched Queer, but from what I gather from the trailers, he plays a sad little gay man. And, you know, he's like, you know, not a super tough agent, you know, it's like he's just a guy, you know, going through life and drama and tears will be shed and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, like I've seen other people bring this up, how this is kind of, it's funny that they're in these roles right now. And it just makes you think like about how inherently kind of tied with queerness like these 2 actors are. These 2 actors just feel like they have a weird cosmic queer relationship. Does that make sense? Yeah, but like honestly, like both of them are just kind of thriving right now with their work and their projects, and are also just looking the hottest they've ever looked. Like their stylist needs a raise. And that's it. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed my 2-month hyperfixation. Any like OG OOQ fans, if I've gotten anything wrong, also if you want to explain more about this Alec guy, because I think it's just funny to just not look up who he is and just like understand who he is through reading more fics and just seeing him pop up. But yeah, like just leave your comments below. Let me know what I got wrong. Let me know other stuff you like about OOQ. Like, comment, subscribe. Boom, boom, boom.